So my topic today is on cognitive theories of learning. I slightly changed it a little bit as applied to presentation and teaching. So it's going to be more of an application than theoretical explanation of what the theories are. Okay. So I'm going to talk about, there's around 8 theories for cognitive theories of learning, but I'm going to select 3 because of the time space. One of them is theory of meaningful learning. The other one is dual coding theory. And the third one is just the theory of visual perception. These are really complicated topics, so that's why I'm going to explain them in more an application of presentation, delivery, and teaching. So before I start, I'm going to ask everybody to break up a piece of paper, sheet of paper, and we're going to have a 10 to 15 second exercise, which is quick. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to show a statement, and I'll give you 10 seconds to remember as many letters as you can. Okay? Are you ready?
As many letters of?
Yeah, I'm going to show you a statement. Just remember as many letters from that statement.
Okay.
Okay? Here we go. Okay, write them down.
Oh, I started when it was up there.
Oh, you start
Sorry.
writing? That's okay. That's okay. Right? No, I'm going to show a different statement right now. Are you done? I'm going to show a different statement right now so that it's the same exercise. I'll give you 10 to 15 seconds to remember as many letters as you can and then write them down, and then you can write them down on a piece of paper.
One?
That's another one,
Oh.
right? Okay, should we start? Go ahead. You're supposed to write it after you read it, after you see the 10 seconds. Okay, so let's stop right now. For the second statement, you remembered more letters, is that correct?
The second statement.
Yeah. You did see it, you can remember. The first one you could not, was not easier to remember. The first statement?
The first statement.
It wasn't easier. This statement, I could see it for 10 seconds, and then I could write down as many letters as I can remember. Now the reason is that this statement, the letters are arranged such in a way that we're familiar with. This is the previous statement. All I have to do is just rearrangement of the letters in the spaces, nothing else. In cognitive learning theory, the first theory, which is meaningful learning, is about how we remember better, or we learn better by something that we're familiar with. Something that, conjoins something that we know previously. This is what you do know, and this is what you're going to learn. So that's the basics of meaningful learning. How this is applied to teaching? There's 3 ways. One of them is analogies. Bring up analogies during classroom. If you're going to explain a concept, bring up an analogy. Everybody knows what's an analogy, right? I bring up an example. This is a real example that I used while I was teaching information security sessions, awareness sessions, and I wanted to persuade the people that if you have an old hard disk or a used hard disk, you want to get rid, and it was stored in it some confidential information, then the only way get rid of the hard disk is to dispose it or destroy it. Nothing else. So I wanted to convince them with this, for example, for this method, or this is the best practice. I bring up an analogy. The analogy is I use a desktop or a computer as closes.
As what?
Closes.
Okay.
Right? Boom. I use clothes. You give it to charity or you sell it. But the hard disk, the comparable of the hard disk compared to clothes is like the underwear. You don't give it to charity, you don't throw it. Right? You don't give it away or you sell it. So you destroy it or you throw it away. Same thing with hard disk. So that's the analogy this is an example of an analogy that I use. Another is proverbs. Everybody knows about proverbs. These kind of examples. These are better, these are better way to convey information rather than something that is very
Solid and
corporate or
concrete.
political abstract statements.
Yes.
So this is something that people better understand. The third thing is schemas. Schemas is a little bit difficult. So in order to explain what schemas is, I'll bring an example. I want to explain a type of fruit called a pomelo fruit. Okay, I want to explain to my students what a pomelo fruit is. First explanation is this. Pomelo is the largest citrus fruit. The rind is very thick, but soft and easy to peel away. The resulting fruit has a light yellow to coral pink flesh and can vary from juicy to slightly dry and from seductively spicy sweet to tangy and tart. That's my first explanation, right? Now, I'm going to use a different explanation. Very short. It's a shorter one.
عروستي. ايه المخلوق ده؟
I'm not sure if you can see it here.
She can stand لو مش قادرة تشوف.
This is the second explanation, right? Can you see it? Pomelo is basically a supersized grapefruit with a very thick and soft rind. Which one is more? Is something that's easier to understand and comprehend. The second one. Why? Because we basically compared a pomelo fruit with something that is more a schema, which is a schema is a grapefruit, something that has generic properties. Any an object or an item, or doesn't necessarily be a physical item. I'm explaining something that has generic properties, and I'm comparing it with. This way, it's easier to understand. Of course, and during learning, it's even far more easier to convey information if I just show a picture, right? This comes to the second learning of theory, which is dual coding theory. Dual coding theory, people comprehend or understand information better by showing information and hearing at the same time, right? I think we just talked about this today in that triangle. There's a research that was done back in the 70s, published in the cognitive psychology paper about how we better remember information or better understand information based on visual objects that are complement while you're hearing something. This is the result of the research. If you hear a piece of information, remember 10%. It's very similar to what we talked about. If I just show you a picture, remember 35%. If I show you a picture and show you the text or hearing the piece of information, remember 65%. The retention rate is 6 times than just hearing a piece of information. So, of course, showing a picture, something that aids what you would talk about, it's a better way to convey information. I'll talk about the third theory, which is Gestalt theory of visual perception. It's a very difficult theory. Only applies, I can find an application in slide design, not the way how you deliver information. So these are really advanced topics on slide design. But I'll just explain more what Gestalt theory is. Gestalt theory is a study of it's a study of bigger picture. Looking at things at the bigger picture, or looking at things at whole, okay? Or how it's not the elements that make the whole, how the elements of an entire thing or the big picture relate to each other. I'll explain what that means. Usually, when you see things in the bigger picture, it has more profound meaning deeper meaning than just the summation of the elements that builds it up. For example, this pointer consists of a piece of plastic that's shaped like this, a spring, and a battery. Actually, this is worth a lot more than the summation of these three parts, right? So, as an example, if I sum up these pieces together, it does not equal to this. Despite this is equal to the summation of this. It has a more greater meaning than just summing things together. That's what Gestalt theory means. How is it applied to slide design? One of them is, there's a lot of principles of Gestalt theory. One of them is continuation. Continuation means follow, I direct the eyes and way we design slides. For example, if I'm going to place any object that has a face, it could be a human or an animal face looking at in a particular direction, I place my text where the eyes are pointing at. If I have an arrow, I have something pointing in my slide, then I place my text where that object is pointing. For example, I have this. Here, the image of the person is looking that way. If I put in the opposite direction, it doesn't look good. I'm not directing the eyes. I'm not directing where I should look at. This is called the Gestalt theory of perception. So this is wrong. I'll tell you, for example, I have another image. Here, it doesn't necessarily somebody is looking, but I have a pen. If I want to place text, I'll place the text where the pen is located, is pointing at. I have something like this. I'll place text here. probably hear even better, but I'm not putting it back at the back of the person. That's what, this is based on the Gestalt theory of continuation. The next principle is law of figure. That means basically in your slide design you have elements, but you have a foreground and you have the basic the image that you want to show, and you have the foreground or the background. So basically what this law says, everything is divided into two, image and the foreground. I'm almost done, by the way. I'm almost done, just 30 seconds. For example, so how this applies to presentation design is to embrace white space. White space means emptiness, and focus on what the element that you want to present. Do not place too much clutter. Back in the 1996, people did not know the results difference between Google and Yahoo, right? This is what Yahoo looked like, and this is what Google looked like. But which one people went to during 1996? Google. It's easier. It directs the eyes where I want to see. It's simple. It's visually appealing. It's relaxing. I know where to go. Over here is a lot of too much clutter. So that's basically white space, emptiness. For example, I have this. Also, it's based on the law of figure. If I'm going to show a table, but I want to focus on one particular element, then I highlight it, right? I'm directing the eyes to where I'm going to need to look. This is an example, a real example about واخدين منح البحث العلمي، جامعة الأخضر منح البحث العلمي. The law of closure. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about. Is certain tendency to fill in gaps. What that means is that if I have something like this, despite the spaces between the letters up here, I still read the word Basho. Despite the gaps in the square, I still perceptually I fill in the gaps. This is a human tendency. This is naturalness that people have. It's a natural tendency to fill in the gaps. Despite perception is missing in E, I still read a perception. How is this applied to presentation design? Is that I use something called implied space. Implied space, I do not necessarily need to show my image in total. I could cut it off. I don't have to show my entire flower. I can just cut it off. Here's an example. This is a demonstration. Can I demonstrate this?
Sure.
Okay. Here's an example. I want to demonstrate. I want to talk about the health benefits of pomegranates. So instead of showing the image like this, I could just go back to. This is a high-resolution image. I can cut it off, and it'll look like this. It still conveys a message. It's still better. It's better than what the original picture. And that's not necessary. I'll place it on the right. I could also place it. I could cut it off and place it on the corners. Okay. It's still visually appealing. Why? Because we have the tendency to fill in the gaps. We don't have to show the entire picture in slide design. Okay. So there's basically. Anybody has any questions?
I love it. I love that.